pretty good list.
Yep, see people coming in. So we'll get started in just 2 minutes here. SBA Payroll Protection Program to maximize loan forgiveness. Yep, great. See people coming in. Trying to take a look at the. We got Amber, Cindy, David. Hey, Emma Kester. I haven't seen you in a long time. Everybody's doing well. Yeah, Barton, welcome to the event here. James. This is going to be timely. PPP loan forgiveness. Got two experts, Jose and John, with us. Erica, welcome to the event. We're going to get started literally just 1 minute here to let people come in. Mary Beth. Luke, welcome to the program. That's my son's name. And Jose, you have a son that's named Lucas, so that's my favorite name. Yep. Great. Nicole, welcome to the event. Ram. Mohan.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, John and Jose, you guys ready?
Ready to go.
Look, we'll get into it. So my name is Kirk. I'm the CEO of FORESIGHT CFO. We help businesses for just this kind of thing, how to use the numbers to make sure that you know how much cash you need and have the funds available to really grow your business. But the here and now is keep your business going in most cases. So I have Jose on the line, who's one of our growth CFOs in Northern Virginia, McLean, just outside of DC. And John Redmond, our growth CFO up in New York. So they're going to lead us through, what do we know now about PPP loan forgiveness. Jose, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm looking at the list here. I recognize some names of folks that were with us at the very first webinar when we first started talking about PPP and EIDL. Look forward to spending some time with you here today, hopefully clearing up some confusion. I'm not going to overpromise and say that we're going to have answers to everything, but we are going to share with you everything we know so far and what we're seeing with our own clients and what we're hearing on the streets with our connections in the banks and so forth. John, want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello, everyone. John Redmond. I'm been a FORESIGHT CFO for a number of years and seen a lot of different growth paths. And frankly, this is the most challenging one, as we all know. So my background's in economic development and CFO work, so between the government and the private sector. So I'm really focused on the strategic situation that we're facing here. So this is this webinar we're going to tell you the best information we have available at this time, and warn you, I think due diligence is that a lot of the information is yet to be developed, the real detailed work, and a lot of it will be in the hands of the banks. So, and Jose will talk more about that. But so we'll tell you what we're pretty sure, and what we don't know, we're going to say we don't know it, and we have to wait. and then you can come back to a webinar in another week and we might know it by then. All right. So Kirk, let's go to the first slide. I'll set this up. Jose has really been in the details. I'm going to let him really kind of drill into the key points, but I want to kind of set up the big picture. In any financial crisis, the first thing you have to do is assess where you're at, right? What is it that's happening? What's happening to the market? What's the big picture? And what's my company's relationship to that? This includes getting the PPP loan. This is not like a get out of jail free card or free money. This money is designed as a stimulus, primarily as a pass-through to your employees, to keep them employed, to keep the economy running, to make sure they have food money. But the secondary benefit is if your company can't hire back the people because your customers disappeared, then the secondary benefit is to give you a long-term loan to help restart your company under the new economic reality. So number one, assess the impact. If you're a restaurant, you know the impact. Nobody's there. If you're a government agency, then you probably still have work. If you're in the financial sector, there's a lot of work to try and figure out what's coming next. So every sector will have different. Construction has stopped, but it might restart. Real estate is probably going to take a hit. Pharmaceuticals and online Zoom is doing great. So every sector will have a different situation, and you will too. Part of the impact that you need to assess here is your customers' situation. You can have a very healthy company, but if your customers are struggling, you're going to struggle. And it may not happen this month or next month, but 6 months down the road, when they run out of their money, might be when you start not getting paid and things like that. So as you're thinking about how to use the PPP money and how much to use right now and get forgiven and how much just to put on a long-term loan, you need to have some numbers to make those decisions. So number one, your numbers are not just for your tax accountant. You should run month to month numbers and use them to make projections. Based on last year's run rate, right? You should calculate some, depending on your situation, whether you're a company that's gaining market share, holding steady, or losing market share in this new scenario. You need to run different financial scenarios for each of those. And you should run good, better, best. One company I'm working with is a food wholesaler. They do fancy desserts to restaurants. And we ran good, better, best numbers for them 4 weeks ago. And they said, oh, well, we might lose 30 or 40% of our business. And I said, no, you should run like, what if you lose 70% of your business? What will you do? So run a Grim Reaper scenario, run kind of a one you think might happen, and run one if things go really well. So that way you have a framework to make these decisions on where to put your money and how to spend it, how fast to spend it. A second thing in any economic crisis is conserve cash. A lot of very good businesses have gone out of business because they ran out of money and couldn't pay the payroll. So a part of that is to negotiate with your lenders and your vendors and your customers. Make sure your customers are paying you, pay the vendors as much as you can, and stretch it out as much as you can. And also your landlords. The fixed costs are what really use up your cash. So if you can extend your rent, you can extend your lease and put some payments, stretch some payments over some time. The landlords are very concerned right now because an empty building is no good to them. And it might even be time to renegotiate some leases or get some special treatment. That should be an early effort on your part. Secondly, talk to your lenders. If you have a line of credit, try and get it extended. Use the PPP really well, because if you do well on this one and handle it well, the odds are really good if there's other programs down the road, you'll be set up, you'll have good grades, if you will, to apply for those if you need them. And finally, and this is, I'm just kind of outlining, of course, best practices.
I like that, John. Good grades so that whatever comes next, if something is needed and comes next, you'll be eligible. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, it's an unknown environment, so be on your best behavior. On the other hand, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's important to claim as many allowed expenses as you can it's very likely that they will, if they don't turn down one of your expense requests and the forgiveness, they'll just turn it into a long-term loan. I don't think there's it's a non-recourse loan, so there's no penalties really for getting it wrong, especially with as much confusion as there is. So be aggressive, but also pay attention. And the final thing is make sure that you've clarified between your fixed and variable costs. You can lose a lot of business as long as your fixed costs drop at the same rate as your variable costs. So if you're going to lose 40% of your business, your fixed cost should drop 40%. And that may make some hard decisions, including like your salary or rent or something that you need to sell off, change, move. So but the time to be aggressive is now, and thoughtful, and think through this with your financial professionals and with your team to really lay out what this plan is. So the PPP is a great infusion. A lot of my companies are completely grateful because it gave them some oxygen and a chance to do this analysis. So it's not enough to pay the payroll and relax. You pay the payroll and focus on getting yourself reorganized. So, okay, enough of me scolding everybody. Jose, let's talk a little bit about, now that everyone on here, I assume, got the PPP or knows people who have it, and so the real question that we're going to address today is how to manage it in such a way that we get good grades and that we get the forgiveness so that it adds to our the company value. So Jose, take it away.
Thanks, John. So Kirk, go ahead and let's go to the next slide. Oh, Kirk, I think
that was me. I'm sorry.
Yep.
So we'd like to ask you to, we're running a survey today to try and get an idea of how much PPP funding was actually awarded to people versus how much they requested. And we're going to do a ratio between the top line revenue and PPP funding among the attendees here. Just trying to get some real world data, and we'll mail out the calculations that we do after the award. So after the event, or I guess it's right here, if the poll pops up, if you could click on that and submit that, it will aggregate the results and kind of give you some sense of what we're looking at. Appreciate that.
Very good. We got results coming in. It's exciting, right? It's kind of drum roll kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Give it a moment here. Get more than half the group, 60 out of 109. Come on, let's go for 100%. This is almost like day trading.
It's like a game show here.
Yeah, definitely. This will help everybody online. The results will be anonymous, right? So there's it'll help for your own business kind of see where things came in at. We got 80%. Anybody else want to get in before we end the polls here? Let's if we get it to 77%, right? So let's see if we can get to 80 or 90. I like 100%. Go for it. This is real. I mean, none of us have ever been, the 2008 recession is the closest. So there's best practices that we're carrying over to, the businesses that act are going to do better than those who don't. And but the pandemic is new. I mean, in the recession, we could at least go to work, right, without fear of shaking hands. So, it's more difficult now to connect with your clients and, really move the dial with them. But it's, like we have in the past, we're going to figure it out. So 87%, I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. Right, got 81% in, that's fantastic. All right. Okay, last click. And this will help us all work together to get somewhere good. Okay, I'm closing the poll. Thank you very much. Fantastic. We can do right, kind of the initial run here, but we'll do some analysis on this and get things out for the.
You can see right there on the screen. There's the poll results. Wow, that's quick.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna click us through to the next.
All right, so this is Jose again. I'm going to hop in now. So when we started this journey, and really the first webinar was probably 4 or 5 weeks ago now, And at that point in time, we all remember the SBA had put out a sample application. It was a one-pager. Literally, there was a handful, half a dozen places to put some data in. And at that point, I remember the very first slide deck I put together, I said, application is going to be easy. And I remember saying, the forgiveness, we'll see how it works out. Now with 4 or 5, maybe even 6 weeks under our belts now of this whole thing, what we've realized is application was not easy, it was easy-ish. And that's because, and this is going to be a theme throughout the next probably 15, 20 minutes, is that it was really dependent on the bank and what bank you were with. Some banks were literally just taking a one-page application and then going back to you and asking for some additional information. Other banks were treating this like their normal underwriting process and were asking for a great deal of information. So it depended on the banks. So as we roll into forgiveness, and that is roughly anywhere from, depending on when your loan originated, 6 to 8 weeks from now, this is the part that's really going to require a lot of attention. It's not going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be necessarily straightforward, but there's a lot of things we can do as a network, as a group of supporters, that will make this thing run more smoothly. But once again, the devil's in the details. So when we get down to this, you know, what I said 4, 5, 6 weeks ago when we first started this, we have to sweat the details. And that's really what we're going to be doing for the next 15, 20 minutes and kind of talking through it. So Kirk, you want to give me the next slide, please? So this is a slide that we created, once again, 4 or 5 weeks ago, but it served as a really nice little reminder of what it is we're talking about. And just real quick, you know, all throughout this process, there's really been 2 loans that the majority of the business community has been focused on. One is the PPP, and to be clear, that is both the PPP and the EIDL are administered by the SBA. The difference between the two, there's several differences, and there's 2 key ones, and I want to just highlight the fact that today we're only going to talk about PPP. But the 2 big differences between the two is, one is the PPP is being administered through banks, and the EIDL is being administered directly through the SBA. The other big difference is that the PPP, there is an opportunity there for forgiveness, up to 100% forgiveness with approval, whereas the EIDL, it's not eligible for forgiveness. So let's be very clear about those 2, and today we're going to focus on the PPP. And when we talk about approval on the forgiveness piece, there's still a little bit of a gray area there. So once again, it'll be a continuing theme. Depending on what bank originated your loan, it could be different from bank to bank, what kind of information, what kind of data pack they're going to ask from you to then put together a forgiveness recommendation that will then go to the SBA. All right, but let's be real clear. Today we're going to focus on PPP because what we're focused on is what we can do to improve our processes to help us with that forgiveness process, our internal process to help us with that overall forgiveness process. Next slide, please. So quick overview and recap. Once again, to set the stage on the PPP, the CARES Act. The act itself provided $349 billion. And as John mentioned before, in its language I really like, it was really meant to be as a pass-through. A lot of folks viewed this as easy capital, free capital, but it really isn't. It was really meant to be as a pass-through to keep employees employed, keep them putting foods on their table, gas in their gas tanks, and so forth, to keep the economy at least going. Very quickly, by April 17th, that first tranche of cash was completely exhausted. We all know that. If you're sitting on this phone call, you've been living this. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of consternation, and there's a complete spectrum of who received loans and who did not receive loans for any number of different reasons. Either banks did not have their act together with regards to the application process, or they had burned through their particular tranche or their particular allocation of that first tranche of cash, which then also left a lot of folks out, let's say out in the cold without receiving any money. So Congress, in response to that, by April 24th, they approved an incremental $310 billion for the CARES program. And that's the money that we're still working through right now. As of yesterday, I've not seen any updates. My understanding is that most of that money's been already used. I don't have any updates to confirm that. But on April 27th is when the SBA started processing those additional loan applications. Once again, a lot of people whose applications did not make it through that first tranche, the expectation is that the banks would work through that next batch of applications in that second tranche. And once again, if you're sitting on this call, chances are you've got your application in, you've been funded, but there's still a lot of, once again, confusion, consternation, and now real frustration around who received funds, how did they receive funds, and to a certain extent, the timeliness of those funds. Next slide, please. So as we're thinking about applying for loan forgiveness, there's one key aspect to all of this that underpins all of it. And that is that the SBA has yet to give clear guidance, regulations for the forgiveness process. So what's happening is, if you talk to your bankers, and for the most part, the bankers I've been speaking with have been very upfront about this, they are designing the process themselves. And by that is what I mean is, and it's being based on how the application process occurred. So if they ask you for 1099s, or I'm sorry, 990s, 991s, those payroll forms, if they ask you for, head count and a list, a detailed list of payroll for the period for the application, the expectation is that they're basically going to try to mirror that exact same application process in the forgiveness process. They will ask you for the same level of data, same level of information. And then that comparison between the two will then tie into the broader conversation or the broader application that at least 75% of those loan proceeds had to be used for payroll. The 25% could be used for things like rent, leases, rents, utilities, things of that nature. So it's, once again, we're going to have to be real flexible as advisors, as recipients, as a network of supporters, as to what each individual company is going to have to put forth for this forgiveness process. It's going to depend on your bank. So let's just keep that in mind. There's still a lot of confusion around this, unfortunately. And the banks are trying to fill that void. But that's one thing you have to keep in mind. Regardless of what I'm going to say here today, probably within 3 days, within a week, I think we scheduled another one of these on Tuesday, because this is changing every day. We might have some more information as to how this plays out. But right now, if you have a loan, make sure that you're in constant communication with your banker, trying to understand what it is they're going to need from you. Because there's a timing and a date tied into all of this. So go ahead, Kirk. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And the timing I'm talking about is that the way the act is currently written is that you have 8 weeks from the day of origination to actually ask for the forgiveness. So depending on when I'm noticing through some of the chat, some of the folks just received their funding last week. So the origination was roughly last week. So within 8 weeks, you have to request the forgiveness. So you have to go to your banker and say, I want that forgiveness. And what I hope is those bankers are already starting to at least send you emails, make phone calls, telling you, here's what I think we're going to need from you when you request forgiveness. So once again, I keep coming back to this. There's going to be a lot of flexibility. You're going to have a lot of flexibility, and you have to work very closely with your banker until there is further guidance, if any, frankly, from the SBA as to how this is going to play out. So as we think through this, so what are you going to have to put forth? How are we going to be defining some of these things? And as the title of the slide is, what we understand so far, how is forgivable payroll cost defined? Roughly speaking, what I've been working with my clients, we've been talking about gross payroll. That includes salary, as an example, commissions, bonuses, things of that nature. And what's tricky in all of this, or it's potentially tricky, is that you have to cap folks at $100,000 on a pro rata basis. So as a rule of thumb, depending on how often you pay payroll, let's say you're doing 24 payrolls during the year. Let's say you're doing, monthly, so 12 payrolls during the year. As you're looking at your monthly payroll and how you're going to put together the calculations for forgiveness, a rule of thumb, which I've been using with my clients, is let's keep it simple. A company that's doing payroll once a month, 12 times a year, I take that $100,000, divide by 12, and then anyone who in that payroll is above that calculation, I cap at the $100,000 divided by 12. That's one way to do it. That's what we've been doing with our clients for the most part, because that's what we understand so far. And with the expectation that as things firm up on the forgiveness process, we may need to change that calculation. But for now, that's how we're tracking the payroll piece of the of this calculation. Then on top of that, just keep in mind, you can also you can also apply healthcare expenses, retirement contributions, 401ks, but you have to be very clear that that is the employer portion of those expenses, not the employee contributions. So be very, very clear about how you think about that. Likewise, you can't include federal taxes, but you can include state taxes. So these are kind of the short, let's say, the rules of thumbs that you can do to track kind of where you are with regards to how much of your PPP loan have you used so far. And I've created spreadsheets for my customers with the schedule, and we put in our assumptions and just understand kind of how this all rolls. And then the next question around is, what else is forgivable? Well, you can add in mortgage and lease obligations. What is interesting though is you can only include interest payments, not principal payments. Once again, this is what we understand so far, and that could change as we get closer to actual forgiveness processes and applications, but that's the rule of thumb we're using. Likewise, utilities. How are utilities being defined? A lot of people think about, of course, electricity, gas, water, telephone, but also include internet access and things around that infrastructure, that communications infrastructure. What's interesting in the verbiage is that transportation is included in the verbiage. And I'll be very open with you. I don't understand. There's been no further guidance on what that transportation means. So work with your banker. So if you've got a fleet of trucks, that might be something you might be able to apply. It's one of those things you need to keep your business going. But like I said, the verbiage has transportation in it, but no additional clarification on what that transportation means. But keep that in mind as you're talking with your banker and you start thinking towards how that forgiveness process is going to look and how it's going to impact you ultimately as to what you have to provide when it comes time to ask for forgiveness. How about the next slide, Kirk? So at the very beginning, and in fact, the very beginning of this whole process 4 or 5 weeks ago, we talked about, sweat the details. How do you keep track of how the PP loan proceeds are being spent? What we've told everyone from the very beginning is make sure you've got a solid accounting package that has solid accounting processes associated with it. If for example, you're commingling all the cash, you get your PPP loan, you have one operating account, you drop it all in there, and your funds are commingled, and ultimately cash is fungible. Be very clear that in your accounting system, be it QuickBooks, be it NetSuite, whatever you might be using, it is very clearly defined. You received a deposit for PPP. When you pay out when you pay out payroll, make sure it's defined. We use PPP funds for this. Make sure it's all very detailed, very clear, very easy to understand. Because ultimately, at some point, you could get the question, what was this for? What was that for? How great would it be if you either got that package already set to go, or more importantly, you can go into your system, hit a button, and print up a report and details exactly when the money came in and how that money went out. And that'll go a long way towards being able to explain how you use those PPP funds. And if you get to that situation where you need to allocate 75% versus payroll, you still paid 25%. It's very easy to bring that forward. So some of our customers are creating cost centers, class codes, all related to COVID or the PPP, depending on how you want to title it. Some of our customers have also opened up a separate bank account specifically for the federal funds, and then taking funds out of that to pay for the PP, to pay for payroll and the other payroll interest payments, utilities, and so forth. So once again, everyone's going to have a slightly different solution potentially, depending on what your system is and your processes, but make sure that you're being very clear on how you're detailing the transactions associated with these Fed funds. Next slide, please, Kirk.
Hey, Jose, we're getting a good flow of questions in the chat box. So while you do your piece, I'll respond to the questions. But good questions. So appreciate
Okay.
that.
So ultimately, we are going to come down to a situation where, what if your loan isn't forgiven? The reality is the solution to that's fairly simple. It's going to become a loan. It's going to have 1% interest. It's going to amortize over 18 months. For all intents and purposes, everything we've seen so far is going to look like a traditional loan with monthly payments to your bank. We get a lot of questions about what that loan might look like. Is it something where it's only be interest only for those first 18 months? If it's going to be a balloon or a bullet at the end of the 18 months? I think once again, that's going to depend on your bank and how that is structured. Right now, as far as I've seen, there's no clear guidance on that, certainly from the SBA. And the bankers we've been working with don't have any clear guidance on that one either at this point in time. But keep in mind, once again, the clock's already ticking. The day the loan originated, you've got 8 weeks to actually go to your bank and request forgiveness. The bank will tell you what they need from you for that forgiveness package. And then what's interesting is the banks then have 60 days to come back to you and tell you if the loan was forgiven or not. Now, part of that 60 days, my understanding is that they need to go to the SBA and make a recommendation on your loan. And then the SBA would say yay or nay to it. So keep that in mind. Even though at the end of the 8-week period, you put in your forgiveness package or application, whatever we're going to call it, there'll be another 60 days or so before you might have an answer as to whether your loan is forgiven. Now, what's unclear, and it's going to depend on your bank, is what happens during those 60 days. Are you on the hook for interest on that outstanding loan? It's unclear right now how that's going to play out, but it's a very important question to ask your bank. Start working with your banker now, so there aren't any hidden costs, any additional expenses associated with this that perhaps you weren't aware of and no one made clear. So that's something to keep in mind. Next slide, Kirk.
Yep. Hey, Jose, I want to make sure that, one of the questions is, can 100% of the loans be used for payroll or only 75%? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good question. It's a question I can easily answer, so I appreciate that. But no, you can use 100% of your loan for payroll. In fact, what I'm seeing is an example with my portfolio of clients. For the most part, we're going to use the full proceeds of the PPP loans only for payroll, and it's just the way it's structured. I know within the firm as a whole, there are some companies where the payroll has changed from, let's say, from when the application was made, i.e., the calculation for total loan, and the payroll head now. So there might be some, we might have to bring in some rent or some of the other allowable expenses into it. But yeah, you can absolutely use 100% of the proceeds for payroll.
In fact, I think if you can, that's a great idea, because that's a perfectly defensible use of the funds and easily forgivable, because that was the intention of the legislation. So if you can do that, that's best.
Yeah. So I'm going to close out my section here with some, for lack of a better term, some interesting facts as I was kind of going through here and over the last few weeks, things that we've been learning. And this data source is actually from an organization called usafacts.org.org. But I just thought I'd share this with you, and then we can get into the Q&A. But as of April 16th, 1.7 million loans have been approved, worth about $342 billion. What blew me away, though, is that the SBA processed more than 14 years worth of loans in less than 2 weeks. I have no idea what the SBA bureaucracy is like. I can't imagine it's like any bureaucracy, but that statistic really surprised me, kind of blew me away. The SBA ran out, as we mentioned before, the SBA ran out of $349 billion after just 13 days, very, very quickly, within 14 days, within 2 weeks. So who received the most loans? I thought this was interesting. Texas received over $134,000 loans. This is all out of the first tranche, by the way. All the details or all the data around the second tranche haven't been released yet. California was number 2 with 113,000 loans. Following up from there, it's Illinois, New York, and Florida all received large loans. As I was digging into the data, what I found really interesting was per capita. So as you can imagine, a state with lots of lots of citizens, but lots of companies applying for the loans, as opposed to say with fewer companies. So the highest per capita in the country was North Dakota. We see on average, a business in North Dakota, they receive $2,037 per head in North Dakota. Once again, because of the lower density of population. California and New York received $845 and $1,000.41 respectively. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Next slide, Kirk. SBA loans by size. I thought this was really interesting. The biggest tranche, the biggest bucket of loans were in the $350 to $1 million range, which coincidentally tied very closely to what we saw in our own portfolio within the firm. Only 17% were 150,000 and under, and only 9% were greater than 5 million. So once again, I thought it was interesting data. As far as the sectors that got the most loans, construction, because the small business construction sector received the largest percentage, 13% or $45.5 billion of that first tranche of loans. Professional services and manufacturing received 13 and 12% respectively. Again, roughly $45 to $45.5 billion each. And what I found surprising to a certain extent, but as I thought through it, maybe not so much, arts, entertainment, and recreation only had 1.5% of the total numbers, or about $5.3 billion. Tell you what, Kirk, one more, next slide. And this one is when we send out this slide deck to you, I just put in here all the different websites, which I thought would be interesting for you. SBA Treasury, how the CARES Act is written, actually, some of the details on it. The second act, HR 266, and then there's all the other Treasury and SBA guidelines. So with that, that's the end of my portion of it. I think at this point, we're going to open up to Q&A, and we can take it from there.
Fantastic. And a lot of people are asking, there's some comments. Hey, there's a lot to take in, and it is. So we will send out a link to the recording, and we'll send out the slides as well to make sure that everybody gets those. And naturally, if you have something that's not covered specifically, we're happy to hop on a call with you and kind of think through your specific situation. And just know that everyone, the banks, the CEOs, everyone is kind of figuring this out as we go. So it's a hot topic. So Jose, do you want me to field questions to you from?
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
the slide? Okay, there's a question here that on a previous slide, there's reference to RTM. What does that mean?
RTM. You think I remember that? I created the slides. Let's see what RTM. Rolling 12 months?
Yep.
Trying to think in this latest slide.
Yeah, it was rolling 12 months as
Yep.
of February was the ones we were doing.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, kind of rolling through the chat box here. And there's a number of questions about 1099s. In general, if you're getting paid from whatever company you work for as a 1099, that company cannot get funded for you or get reimbursed for you, but you individually as a 1099 contractor can submit for yourself, which a bit of a hassle.
No, but but that's correct. So when the CARES Act first came out, there was, well, once again, confusion, but 1099s were part of the payroll calculation for the size of loan you could apply for. About a week to 2 weeks after that, the 1099s were taken out. I mean, the timing's probably wrong, but shortly thereafter, the 1099s were taken out of a company's payroll calculation, or loan size calculation, because the Fed or the SBA opened up, opened up the door so that 1099s could then apply for themselves directly. And frankly, since we don't have 1099s as our clients, I don't know what the success or the frustration might have been around that process, or how much money went out the door for that.
Yeah, very, very good. Hope that answers the question. If not, shoot us an email. There's another question here about about the payroll date. So to meet that that 8-week window, the question is, can I adjust the payroll date and run an early payroll to meet the 8-week deadline?
The answer, I'll tell you, I think the easy answer is yes. I've seen nothing that says you can't, add in an additional payroll period into this 8 weeks. But again, check with your bank. My expectation is that should be okay. I've got a couple of clients planning on doing that, but we're also waiting for guidance from the banks to make sure that doesn't cause a problem on the back end.
And Jose, several of my clients are going to just use their regular payroll, but they're going to claim a percentage of the payroll based on the days that payroll covered. So when you ask for forgiveness, you'll ask for 18% of this payroll, all of this payroll, all of that payroll, and 32% of that payroll to be forgiven. That's another way to do it. But the bank, again, will give you, that's again, too early to tell.
Yep, and if you incurred, the basic rule is the safest bet is incurred and paid. So normally there's a period of time across weeks, months, where the employee did the work, but you haven't paid them yet. So up to that 8-week deadline date, if the payroll is incurred and you actually make the payment, you cut the check to that employee, it's a pretty safe bet that that's you have your payroll documents in your 940s and 941s that show that within that time period, you're in good shape. Okay, so here's one. It says I've gotten the loan approval number, but have not received the execution documents from the bank yet, and so there's a question about whether the 8-week clock started. I'll answer that is no. If you haven't signed after you sign the documents, the money will move pretty quickly into your bank account. So it literally is that funding date, at the very earliest starts when you sign the documents to, basically you sign the debt agreement. That's, when you get the funds, that is when the clock starts, not based on your approval date. But I would definitely be talking to my bank intensively to get those documents, because, the money, I think it's down to less than 100 billion right now that's still left, which goes fast. So, okay, let's see here. So there's a question here about, are hires for new positions or new employees eligible for PPP forgiveness? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can chime in on that one. The answer to that is yes. As an example, if someone left, I've got clients who they had employees actually leave the payroll. Now, they weren't let go, they just quit and found another, or they were offered a different job and they went to another company. So that backfill person does qualify to be part of that PPP application, or I'm sorry, that PPP forgiveness application. So I think the short answer again is yes. But I think there's going to be that one. I know I sound like a broken record. Check with the bank. But it's also got to be clear to a certain extent that if someone left, if you go back to your calculation of the loan amount and you had 8 heads in it, between that getting the loan and the forgiveness process, one of those 8 heads quit, went to another job, but you backfilled that person, that seems reasonable, right? And I think the bank or even the SBA could easily follow that, follow that logic. But, once again, check with your bank. I think the easy answer is yes, that would qualify. But I think everyone will be on the lookout for anything that smells kind of fishy or looks, doesn't look above board.
Yeah, and the language is pretty clear. It's based on FTE, not the person's name. It's based on the total amount of wages paid out, and it's based on, at some point they may come back and was there really adverse economic impact to your business? So kind of roughly those 3 criteria should guide judgment. Thank you, Jose. There's a let's see. There's a question here about, are bonuses included? I'll just kind of jump in on this one. I did a lot of research yesterday for a client. Things like wages and commission, like if you have a salesperson that's commission based, that's part of their normal compensation, that's included. The language that's out so far does not speak specifically to bonuses, right? Extra money on top of everything else. So the fact that it's silent on that is not listed as being allowable. The answer is probably not bonuses. That's that's kind of like pay on top of pay, which is not the intent of the SBA PPP program. So you can always play in the gray area, but if you get audited, you might be that money might not be forgiven and just might be part of the debt that you got to pay back. Okay, so we're at time. I want to kind of respect people beyond this. We're gonna keep doing this all the way through until your companies are survive and thrive the pandemic. Take action with that clarity, confidence, so you have the impacts you want. We'll keep doing webinars week to week at kind of following the bouncing ball based on what you need to be clear on what the next steps are. We will send out the slides, the recording to this, and naturally all three of us are available if you really want to pop things open and think about your specifics. We're more than happy to do that. So John, Jose, any departing comments for the CEOs here?
Go ahead, John.
I think keep your head up, look down the road, and good luck.
For me, it's exactly what John said, but bottom line is consider us part of your network. Have any questions, comments, feel free to give us a call. Feel free to send an email. We're here to help at the end of the day. And the one thing we've discovered, especially in this last 5 to 6 weeks since we started these, it really is about the network. This is all about bringing in the right advisors, having the right support network to get you through this. And we just want you to think of us as part of that network now. Anything you need, just give us a holler. And if we don't know something, we'll tell you. I think you get the feel that we're pretty straightforward. And if we do know something, we'll do everything in our power to inform you and hopefully make you a little bit smarter.
Yep. Jose and John, thank you so much. I very much appreciate you jumping on and getting the word out to folks here. So thank you and good hunting. So talk to all of you soon.